galaxy was vast, almost impossibly so. Stars burned brightly in the endless void, their light stretching across millions of miles, illuminating planets and moons that spun silently in their orbits. It was a place of wonder, beauty, and danger, a cosmic battlefield where civilizations clashed for control over resources, territory, and survival. Among these warring factions were two dominant powers: the Zarnok Collective, a militaristic empire known for its brute strength and unrelenting aggression, and the Ethereal Concord, an enigmatic alliance of species whose advanced technology and mysterious ways made them both admired and feared. For decades, the Zarnoks and Ethereals had been locked in a bitter conflict. Their battles raged across star systems, leaving destruction in their wake. Entire worlds had been reduced to rubble, their populations displaced or wiped out entirely. Yet despite the scale of their war, neither side could claim victory. Both were too evenly matched, each with strengths that countered the other's weaknesses. And so the fighting dragged on, year after year, until it became something like background noise. A constant hum of violence that everyone had grown used to, but no one truly understood. But then, something unusual happened, something unexpected. On the edge of Sector K-27, a contested region deep within the war zone, sensors picked up an anomaly. A small vessel, barely more than a speck against the backdrop of stars, had entered the area. At first glance, it didn't seem remarkable. It wasn't heavily armed, nor did it carry any visible insignia that marked it as belonging to either faction. But there was something about it that caught the attention of both sides. Its trajectory suggested purpose, not aimlessness. Someone or something was piloting it deliberately into the heart of the conflict. The Zarnoks reacted first, dispatching scout ships to investigate. They were cautious but curious. After all, this part of space was supposed to be under their control. What was this unknown craft doing here? Was it a spy ship sent by the Ethereals? Or perhaps some rogue element trying to exploit the chaos of war for its own gain? Whatever the case, they weren't going to take any chances. Meanwhile, the Ethereals monitored the situation closely, their sleek vessels hovering just beyond sensor range. They were patient, calculating, waiting to see how the Zarnoks would respond before making their move. As the days passed, the mystery only deepened. Attempts to communicate with the vessel failed repeatedly. No response came when hailed in Galactic Standard, the universal language spoken by most intelligent species in the galaxy. This lack of communication raised suspicions. Why wouldn't the crew answer? Were they hostile? Or was their silence a sign of something else entirely? What neither side realized was that the truth was far simpler, and yet, in its own way, far more complex. The ship wasn't a weapon of war or a tool of espionage. It was a refugee vessel, carrying the last remnants of a human colony that had been destroyed during a previous skirmish between the Zarnoks and Ethereals. These humans weren't soldiers. They were civilians, ordinary people who had lost everything. Their homes had been obliterated, their families torn apart, or their lives shattered. All they had left was each other and the battered old ship that now carried them through the stars. Their leader was a practical thinker, someone who had spent years fixing machines and solving problems rather than leading armies or negotiating treaties. This person hadn't asked for responsibility. It had simply fallen into their lap when the colony fell. Now faced with impossible odds, they had made a decision that defied logic but felt necessary: to cross into enemy territory in search of safety. It was a gamble, yes, but staying put meant certain death. Moving forward offered at least a sliver of hope. The journey had been harrowing. Supplies were running low, morale was fragile, and every jump through hyperspace brought new dangers. But somehow they had kept going, were driven by sheer determination in the belief that somewhere out there, they might find refuge. Little did they know, however, that their arrival in the war zone would set off a chain reaction neither they nor their pursuers could have anticipated. To the Zarnox and Ethereals, humanity was still largely an unknown quantity. Humans had only recently begun exploring the stars, their presence in the galaxy minimal compared to older, more established species. But what little the aliens knew of humans intrigued them. These newcomers were physically weak, their bodies frail compared to the hardy frames of the Zarnox or the ethereal forms of the Ethereals. Yet they possessed a tenacity that bordered on recklessness. When cornered, they fought back with ferocity. When faced with challenges, they adapted quickly. And when pushed to the brink, they found ways to survive, even thrive against all odds. It was this unpredictability that made the humans such a wild card. Neither the Zarnox nor the Ethereals could predict what they might do next. Would they surrender peacefully, attack without warning, or perhaps try to play both sides against each other? The uncertainty gnawed at them, fueling paranoia and distrust. And as the human vessel drifted closer to the heart of the war zone, tensions escalated rapidly. On board the ship, the survivors remained unaware of the storm brewing around them. They were focused on surviving another day, another hour. Exhaustion lined their faces, and fear lingered in their eyes. But there was also a flicker of defiance, a refusal to give up, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. They worked together, pooling their skills and resources to keep the ship operational. Some patched up damaged systems, while others rationed food and water. A few tried to maintain morale, sharing stories or singing songs to distract themselves from the bleak reality outside. And yet, despite their unity, doubts crept in. Was their leader making the right call? Could they really trust that crossing into enemy territory would lead to salvation, or were they walking straight into a trap? These questions hung heavy in the air, unspoken but ever present. Still, they pressed on, clinging to the hope that somehow, some way, they would make it through. Little did they know, their actions were about to change everything, not just for themselves, but for the entire galaxy. Because sometimes it's not the strongest or the smartest who shape history. Sometimes it's the ones who refuse to give up, even when the universe seems determined to crush them. And as the human vessel continued its perilous journey, the stage was set for a story that would echo across the stars, a tale of courage, ingenuity, and the indomitable spirit of a species that refused to fade into oblivion. The human vessel drifted cautiously through the war zone, its crew tense and alert. Every flicker on the radar screen felt like a potential threat. Every shadow in the distance, a possible enemy. They had known the risks of entering this contested region, knew that their small, unarmored ship was no match for the massive warships patrolling these stars, but they hadn't anticipated just how quickly things would escalate. What started as a desperate bid for survival was about to become something far more dangerous. It began with the first contact attempt. A Zarnox scout ship approached, its sleek, angular design unmistakable even from a distance. The humans watched anxiously as it drew closer, its weapon systems glowing faintly, a silent but clear warning. Communication channels crackled to life, filled with ecstatic and garbled voices, speaking in Galactic standard. The leader of the human group stepped forward, gripping the microphone tightly. Their hands trembled slightly, but their voice remained steady as they tried to respond. "We are peaceful travelers," they said slowly, carefully enunciating each word. "We seek refuge. Please, we mean no harm." But the message didn't get through. The outdated communication equipment aboard the human ship struggled to interface with the advanced alien technology. Static drowned out their words, leaving only fragments of sound that made no sense to the Zarnox. Frustrated and suspicious, the aliens fired another hail of transmissions, demanding clarification. When none came, they moved into position around the human vessel, surrounding it like predators circling prey. On board, panic began to rise. Some of the survivors whispered nervously among themselves, while others clung to whatever they could find for reassurance. The leader raised their hands, trying to calm everyone down. "Stay focused," they urged. "We can't afford to lose control now." Meanwhile, the ethereals observed from afar. Their ships hung back, cloaked in shimmering energy fields that rendered them nearly invisible. Unlike the brash, aggressive Zarnox, the ethereals preferred subtlety. They studied the situation carefully, now analyzing every detail before deciding how or if to intervene. For now, they chose to wait, watching as the Zarnox took charge. Back on the human ship, tensions reached a breaking point when the Zarnox launched boarding parties. Clad in heavy armor and armed with cutting-edge weaponry, the alien soldiers breached the hull with ease. Alarms blared throughout the vessel, startling the already frightened humans. Chaos erupted as people scrambled to defend themselves, grabbing whatever tools or makeshift weapons they could find. The leader stepped forward again, raising their hands in a gesture of surrender. "We are not your enemy," they shouted, hoping the aliens would understand. But the Zarnox weren't listening. To them, the humans' resistance, even if born out of fear, was proof of hostility. Shots rang out, or filling the air with flashes of light and deafening noise. Several humans fell, injured or worse, as the invaders pushed deeper into the ship. What followed was a brutal skirmish, one that neither side had expected. Outnumbered and outgunned, the humans should have been easy targets. But desperation has a way of unlocking hidden reserves of strength. Using their knowledge of the ship's layout, they set traps, blocking corridors with debris, disabling critical systems to confuse the attackers, and luring them into narrow spaces where their numbers became a disadvantage. One by one, the Zarnox soldiers fell victim to these clever tactics, their arrogance turning into frustration. Word of the battle spread quickly. Both factions, the Zarnox and the Ethereals, were stunned by what they heard. Oh, how could such a primitive species hold its ground against trained warriors? Rumors began to circulate, painting the humans as cunning fighters capable of outsmarting even the most advanced adversaries. Some dismissed these stories as exaggerations, but others took them seriously, seeing potential value in allying with such resourceful beings. As the fighting subsided, the Zarnox withdrew, regrouping to assess the damage. On board the human ship, the survivors gathered together, shaken but alive. They tended to their wounded, patched up the ship's battered systems, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. The leader stood silently at the center of it all, their expression unreadable. Inside, though, their mind raced with questions. Had they done the right thing? Could they keep going like this? Constantly looking over their shoulders, waiting for the next attack? Despite their victory, the mood on board was somber. There was no celebration, no sense of triumph, only exhaustion, and the growing realization that they couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, they would have to face the truth. They were trapped in a war zone, surrounded by enemies who saw them as either threats or pawns. Survival alone wouldn't be enough. They needed a plan, one that went beyond mere defense. That night, as the ship drifted quietly through the void, the leader called a meeting. Everyone crowded into the main cabin, their faces pale but resolute. "We've shown them we won't go down without a fight," the leader began, their voice firm despite the weariness in their eyes. "But fighting isn't enough. We need to think bigger, smarter. If we want to survive, we have to turn the situation to our advantage." The idea sparked murmurs of agreement, though some looked skeptical. How could a ragtag group of refugees hope to outwit two galactic superpowers? It seemed impossible. And yet, as the leader laid out their strategy, hope began to take root. They proposed using the ship itself as a tool, not just for survival, but for deception. By modifying its systems to emit false signals, they could create the illusion of a larger fleet lurking nearby. This phantom armada might buy them time, forcing both sides to hesitate before attacking again. Work began immediately. The survivors pooled their skills, working tirelessly to rewire the ship's aging technology. Engineers tinkered with circuits, scavenging parts from damaged areas to build new components, and others helped by keeping watch, ensuring they weren't caught off guard by another ambush. Despite the grueling pace, morale improved. For the first time since leaving their destroyed colony, they felt like they were doing more than just surviving. They were fighting back. Outside, the Zarnox and Ethereals continued to debate their next move. The skirmish had left both sides wary, unsure whether the humans were truly as harmless as they claimed, or if they posed a greater threat than anyone realized. Leaders clashed over strategy, fracturing alliances and creating opportunities for exploitation. Meanwhile, rogue elements within both factions began reaching out to the humans, offering secret deals in exchange for supplies or intelligence. Oh, these clandestine communications marked the beginning of a shift, one that would soon ripple across the galaxy. For now, though, the humans remained focused on their immediate goal, staying alive. As they worked to complete their modifications, they knew the real challenge lay ahead. The false signals would only work for so long before the truth came to light. When that happened, they would need more than tricks to survive. They would need allies, beings willing to stand with them against overwhelming odds. But finding those allies wouldn't be easy, especially in a universe where trust was as rare as peace. And so, as the human vessel continued its perilous journey, the stage was set for a confrontation unlike any other. The survivors had proven they could hold their own in a fight. But now they faced a different kind of battle. One fought not with weapons, but with words, actions, and sheer determination. Whether they succeeded or failed, one thing was certain. Humanity's arrival in the war zone had changed everything, and nothing would ever be the same again. The human vessel floated silently in the vast expanse of space, its crew working feverishly to prepare for what lay ahead. The modifications to their ship were nearly complete, but the tension on board was palpable. Everyone knew that their next move would determine whether they lived or died. It wasn't just about surviving another day. It was about taking control of their fate, however fragile that control might be. The leaders stood at the center of the chaos, overseeing the final adjustments. They had spent hours poring over schematics, consulting with the engineers and testing every new system to ensure it worked as intended. The goal was simple yet audacious: create the illusion of a phantom fleet, a massive armada lurking just beyond sensor range. If they could pull it off, it might buy them time, maybe even respect. But if they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. As the work continued, the survivors found themselves reflecting on how far they'd come. Just weeks ago, they had been ordinary people, farmers, teachers, mechanics, and engineers, living quiet lives on a remote colony. Now they were fugitives, fighting not just for survival, but for a chance to rewrite their story. Each person brought something unique to the table, and together they formed an unlikely team. Their unity was their greatest strength, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, humanity could rise above despair. Finally, the modifications were ready. With a deep breath, the leader gave the order to activate the false signals. The ship hummed softly as its systems came online, broadcasting a carefully crafted deception. To any observer, it appeared as though dozens of ships were moving in formation nearby, their signatures matching those of advanced war vessels. The humans held their collective breath, waiting to see if their plan would work. It didn't take long for the ruse to attract attention. Both the Zarnox and the Ethereals detected the Phantom fleet almost immediately. Alarms blared across their command centers, and leaders scrambled to assess the threat. For the Zarnox, the sight of so many ships was alarming. Could this be an ambush orchestrated by the Ethereals? Or perhaps reinforcements from some unknown ally? Either way, it forced them to rethink their strategy. Instead of launching another direct assault on the human vessel, they opted for caution, pulling back their forces to regroup. The ethereals, meanwhile, reacted differently. Known for their analytical approach, they dispatched drones to investigate further. These sleek, insect-like machines darted through space, scanning for signs of life or activity. When they returned empty-handed, finding no evidence of actual ships, the ethereals grew suspicious. Was this a trick? And if so, who was behind it? While the aliens debated, the humans seized the opportunity to act. Using encrypted channels and scavenged communication devices, the leader reached out to rogue elements within both factions. These were individuals or groups disillusioned with the war, tired of endless bloodshed, or simply looking for an edge over their rivals. By offering them valuable intelligence or promising future cooperation, the humans began forging tentative alliances. These secret negotiations weren't easy. Trust was hard to come by in a galaxy torn apart by conflict. Many of the rogues demanded proof of the humans' worth before committing to anything. In response, the leader shared snippets of information gleaned from intercepted transmissions and sensor readings. They revealed weaknesses in Zarnak defenses, vulnerabilities in ethereal technology, and potential choke points in the war zone that could be exploited. Slowly but surely, these disclosures earned them credibility and support. One particularly daring deal involved smuggling supplies to a group of ethereal defectors hiding in an asteroid belt. The humans risked everything to deliver food, medicine, and spare parts, knowing that failure would mean certain death. But when the mission succeeded, the defectors swore loyalty to their cause, vowing to provide shelter and protection whenever needed. Similar arrangements were made with Zarnak deserters, though these interactions were fraught with danger. The Zarnoks were notorious for their ruthlessness, and betrayal carried severe consequences. Yet even among their ranks, there were those weary of war, willing to gamble on a new alliance if it meant escaping the cycle of violence. Back on the human ship, morale began to improve. The survivors felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that their efforts were making a difference. They weren't just drifting aimlessly anymore. They were players in a much larger game. Every successful negotiation, every piece of intelligence shared, brought them closer to achieving their ultimate goal, finding a safe haven where they could rebuild their lives. But the road ahead was still fraught with challenges. Maintaining the illusion of the Phantom Fleet required constant vigilance. Any slip-up could expose the deception, leaving them vulnerable to attack. Moreover, the alliances they forged were tenuous at best. Rogues were unpredictable, often acting in their own self-interest rather than out of genuine loyalty. One wrong move could turn allies into enemies overnight. Despite these risks, the leader remained resolute, and they understood that survival in the galaxy wasn't just about brute force. It was about adaptability, ingenuity, and the ability to think several steps ahead. The humans lacked the firepower of the Zarnoks, or the advanced technology of the ethereals, but they possessed something neither side fully appreciated: creativity. Where others saw obstacles, they saw opportunities. Where others relied on tradition, they embraced innovation. And where others hesitated, they acted. As days turned into weeks, the humans' influence began to grow. Their Phantom Fleet kept both factions guessing, preventing either side from launching a decisive strike. Meanwhile, their network of allies expanded, giving them access to resources and information they desperately needed. They learned which planets were safe to visit, which trade routes were least guarded, and which neutral zones offered temporary refuge. Bit by bit, they carved out a niche for themselves in the galactic landscape. Yet even as their fortunes improved, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on the leaders' shoulders. They knew that every decision they made carried consequences, not just for themselves, but for everyone on board the ship. Mistakes could cost lives, and hesitation could lead to disaster. So they pushed forward, driven by a mix of determination and desperation. One evening, as the ship drifted quietly through the void, The leader gathered the crew for a rare moment of reflection. "We've come a long way," they said, their voice steady despite the exhaustion in their eyes. "We started as refugees, running from destruction. Now we're shaping the course of this war. People are watching us, wondering what we'll do next. We can't afford to let them down." The words resonated deeply with the survivors. They nodded in agreement, their faces lighting up with pride. For the first time since leaving their colony, they felt like more than victims. They felt like pioneers charting a path through uncharted territory. And while the journey was far from over, they knew they had the strength to see it through. Outside, the galaxy continued to spin, oblivious to the drama unfolding within its borders. Wars raged on, stars burned brightly, and civilizations rose and fell. But amidst the chaos, one small group of humans refused to give up. Against all odds, they had found a way to survive and thrive in a hostile universe. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear: their arrival in the war zone had sparked a chain reaction that would change the galaxy forever. The human vessel had become a symbol of defiance, a small, battered ship that refused to be crushed under the weight of galactic politics. Its crew had proven time and again that they were not just survivors but fighters, capable of outsmarting enemies far stronger than themselves. Yet despite their growing influence and clever strategies, the reality of their situation remained stark. They were still outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded by forces that could annihilate them in an instant if given the chance. Every victory they achieved was hard-fought, every alliance fragile, and every decision fraught with risk. For weeks, the humans had managed to stay one step ahead of their adversaries. And their phantom fleet kept both the Zarnoks and Ethereals guessing, forcing them to divert resources and attention away from each other. Meanwhile, their network of rogue allies continued to expand, providing much-needed supplies and intelligence. But as effective as these tactics were, they couldn't last forever. Sooner or later, the deception would unravel, and when it did, the humans would need more than tricks to survive. That moment came sooner than anyone expected. A high-ranking Zarnok commander, infuriated by the humans' interference, decided enough was enough. This particular Zarnok was known for his brutal efficiency and unyielding determination. To him, the humans weren't just pests. They were a stain on the honor of his empire, a reminder of how a supposedly inferior species had repeatedly humiliated them. He vowed to wipe them out personally no matter the cost. Under cover of darkness, both literal and metaphorical, the Zarnok commander launched a surprise assault. His fleet moved swiftly and silently, bypassing the phantom signals that had fooled others before. By the time the humans detected the incoming ships, it was almost too late. Alarms blared throughout the vessel, jolting everyone awake. Panic spread quickly, but the leader stepped forward, their voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "We've been here before," they said firmly, their eyes scanning the frightened faces around them. "We've faced worse odds and come out on top. We can do this again, but only if we work together." Their words steadied the crew, reigniting the spark of resilience that had carried them this far. Everyone sprang into action, preparing for what would likely be their toughest battle yet. Engineers scrambled to reinforce the ship's defenses, while others armed themselves with whatever weapons they could improvise. The leader coordinated the effort, issuing orders with calm precision. There was no time for hesitation. Every second counted. As the Zarnok fleet closed in, the humans executed their plan. Using their knowledge of the surrounding terrain, a dense field of unstable asteroids, they lured the enemy ships into a deadly trap. The asteroids, rich in volatile minerals, were prone to explosive reactions when struck by energy weapons. Knowing this, the humans maneuvered their ship carefully, drawing the Zarnoks deeper into the field. At first, the aliens didn't realize the danger. Confident in their superior firepower, they pursued relentlessly, firing volley after volley at the fleeing human vessel. But then, the first asteroid exploded. A brilliant flash of light illuminated the battlefield, followed by a shock wave that sent debris hurtling in all directions. Several Zarnok ships were caught in the blast, their hulls breached and systems failing. Chaos erupted as the remaining vessels struggled to regroup, only to trigger more explosions as they fired blindly into the field. The humans watched from a safe distance, their hearts pounding as the tide of the battle turned in their favor. When the dust finally settled, the Zarnok fleet was in ruins. Dozens of ships had been destroyed, and those that remained were badly damaged. The commander, humiliated and enraged, ordered a retreat, vowing revenge. For the humans, it was a stunning victory, one that defied all expectations. Word of their triumph spread quickly, reaching even the farthest corners of the galaxy. Stories of their daring ambush became legend, earning them grudging respect from some quarters and outright fear from others. Among those who took notice were the leaders of the ethereal Concord. For months they had observed the humans' actions with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. These newcomers possessed none of the advanced technology or military might that defined most galactic powers. Yet they had consistently proven themselves formidable opponents. Their ability to adapt, innovate, and persevere against overwhelming odds was something the Ethereals found intriguing and potentially useful. Recognizing an opportunity, the Ethereals extended an official offer of partnership. Through secure channels, they contacted the human leader, proposing an alliance that would grant the survivors protection, resources, and a place within the Concord's ranks. It was a tempting proposition, one that promised stability and security after months of uncertainty. But accepting it wasn't an easy decision. The leader called a meeting to discuss the offer, gathering the crew in the main cabin. Tensions ran high as opinions clashed. Some argued that joining the Ethereals was their best chance at survival, while others worried about becoming pawns in someone else's game. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford, especially when dealing with beings as enigmatic as the Ethereals. After hours of heated debate, the leader made their choice. "We've fought too hard to give up our freedom," they said, their voice firm but tinged with sadness. "But we also can't keep going like this, constantly looking over our shoulders. If we want a future, not just for ourselves but for generations to come, we need allies. And right now the Ethereals are offering us that chance." With the decision made, the humans accepted the alliance, knowing it came with risks but believing it was worth taking. The Ethereals welcomed them warmly, providing immediate assistance in the form of food, medical supplies, and repairs for their battered ship. More importantly, they offered sanctuary, a neutral zone where the humans could rest and regroup without fear of attack. In return, the humans agreed to share their knowledge and expertise, helping the Ethereals navigate the complexities of the war zone. Their insights proved invaluable, allowing the Concord to exploit weaknesses in the Zarnok forces that had previously gone unnoticed. Together, they launched a series of coordinated strikes, targeting key strongholds and supply lines. Each victory bolstered their reputation, drawing more defectors and sympathizers to their cause. As the war dragged on, the humans' role became increasingly prominent. They weren't just allies anymore. They were partners, equals in a fight that had once seemed unwinnable. Their presence inspired others, reminding them that even the smallest spark could ignite change. Across the galaxy, whispers of hope began to spread, carried by those who had witnessed the humans' courage firsthand. For the survivors, the alliance marked a turning point, not just in the war, but in their own journey. They had started as refugees, clinging to life in a hostile universe. Now they were shaping the course of history, proving that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its weapons or technology, but in its spirit. That indomitable will to survive, to adapt, and to thrive against all odds was what set them apart. Yet even as they celebrated their successes, the leader remained cautious. They knew the war wasn't over, and neither was their struggle. peace was still a distant dream, and the road ahead would be long and difficult. But for the first time in months, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet reflection. Standing at the viewport, they gazed out at the stars, their hearts swelling with pride. Against all odds, they had made it this far. And though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear. Humanity's arrival in the galaxy had changed everything, whether for better or worse, and their story was now intertwined with the fate of the universe, and nothing would ever be the same again. The war that had raged for decades across the stars was finally beginning to wind down. The Zarnak Collective, once a dominant force in the galaxy, found itself on the defensive, its resources stretched thin, and its morale shattered. The ethereal Concord, bolstered by their alliance with humanity, pressed their advantage relentlessly. Together, they dismantled key Zarnak strongholds, cutting off supply lines and isolating pockets of resistance. Each victory brought them closer to an endgame, one that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. For the humans aboard their battered vessel, this period marked both triumph and reflection. They had come so far from the days when they were just refugees fleeing destruction, clinging to hope amidst despair. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder with one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, their contributions earning them respect and admiration. Yet despite their newfound status, they never forgot where they came from, or what it had taken to get here. The leader of the human group often found themselves staring out at the stars, lost in thought. They had carried the weight of responsibility for so long, making decisions that affected not only their crew, but also the broader conflict. Every choice had been a gamble, every step forward fraught with uncertainty. But now, as peace talks loomed on the horizon, they allowed themselves a rare moment of quiet pride. Against all odds, they had led their people through unimaginable challenges, were proving that even the smallest voices could make a difference in the grand tapestry of the universe. The final push against the Zarnoks was brutal. Both sides knew the stakes, and neither was willing to back down without a fight. The humans played a critical role in these last battles, using their ingenuity and adaptability to exploit weaknesses others might have overlooked. One particularly daring operation involved infiltrating a heavily fortified Zarnak base hidden within a nebula. The mission was risky, failure meant certain death, but the potential rewards were too great to ignore. Under cover of darkness, the humans worked alongside ethereal operatives to disable the base's defenses. Using modified drones scavenged from earlier missions, they created diversions while stealth teams slipped inside undetected. It was a delicate dance, while requiring precision and coordination. For hours, they moved silently through the labyrinthine corridors, disabling systems and gathering intelligence. When the signal came to strike, the combined forces launched a devastating assault, catching the Zarnoks completely off guard. The fall of the base was a turning point. With its loss, the Zarnak leadership crumbled, unable to mount a coherent defense. Surrender became inevitable, and soon representatives from all three factions gathered around a massive conference table aboard an ethereal flagship. The atmosphere was tense, filled with mistrust and lingering animosity. But beneath the surface, there was also a shared understanding. The war had gone on long enough. It was time to find a way forward, to rebuild what had been broken and forge a new path for the galaxy. During the negotiations, the humans took center stage, their presence serving as a reminder of the cost of war. Their story resonated deeply with those present, highlighting the fragility of life and the importance of cooperation. The leader spoke passionately, urging both sides to see beyond their differences and focus on the future. "We've all lost too much," they said, their voice steady but filled with emotion. "This war has taken homes, families, and dreams. If we continue down this path, there will be nothing left to fight for. Let us choose peace, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary." Their words struck a chord, breaking through years of bitterness and resentment. Slowly, painfully, the factions began to find common ground. Agreements were hammered out, compromises reached, and treaties signed. And it wasn't perfect. Peace rarely is. But it was a start. The truce that emerged was fragile, held together by threads of trust that could easily snap under pressure. But for the first time in generations, there was hope. With the war officially over, the humans turned their attention to rebuilding. The ethereals offered them a permanent home within their territory, a lush, habitable planet untouched by conflict. It was a generous gesture, one that underscored the deep bond that had formed between the two groups. Grateful but cautious, the humans accepted the offer, knowing it represented more than just shelter. It was a chance to start anew, to create something beautiful from the ashes of their past. Settling into their new home wasn't easy. The scars of war ran deep, and healing would take time. Many struggled with memories of what they had endured, the losses they had suffered, the sacrifices they had made. But slowly, steadily, they began to rebuild. Crops were planted, homes constructed, and communities formed. Children laughed again, their laughter echoing through fields that had once been barren. Life, in all its complexity and beauty, returned. The leader watched it all unfold with a mixture of awe and gratitude. They had never sought glory or recognition. Their only goal had been survival. Yet somehow they had become a symbol of resilience, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. People looked to them for guidance, trusting their judgment and drawing inspiration from their example. Though they carried the burden of leadership lightly, they understood the responsibility that came with it. Wow, this was more than just a colony, it was a legacy. As the years passed, stories of the human's journey spread throughout the galaxy. Travelers passing through ethereal space often stopped to visit the thriving settlement, eager to learn about the species that had defied the odds. The survivors welcomed them warmly, sharing tales of courage, ingenuity, and unity. These interactions helped bridge cultural divides, fostering understanding and cooperation between humanity and other galactic races. But perhaps the most profound impact was felt closer to home. The next generation, born into peace, grew up hearing stories of their ancestors' struggles and triumphs. They learned about the war not as a distant historical event, but as a personal legacy, one that shaped who they were and who they aspired to be. Inspired by the past, they dreamed of a future where humanity played an active role in shaping the galaxy, not as conquerors or victims, but as equals. Back on Earth, news of the colony's success sparked renewed interest in space exploration. Governments and private organizations alike invested heavily in interstellar travel, eager to reconnect with their distant kin. Missions were launched, carrying messages of goodwill and offers of collaboration. For the first time, humanity truly stepped onto the galactic stage, ready to claim its place among the stars. And yet, even as they looked to the future, the humans never forgot their roots. The battered old ship that had carried them through the war zone remained intact, preserved as a monument to their journey. It served as a reminder of where they had come from, and of the indomitable spirit that had carried them through the darkest moments. In the end, their story was one of hope. Hope that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity could rise above adversity. Hope that cooperation and understanding could overcome division and hatred. And hope that no matter how vast the universe might seem, the smallest actions could ripple outward, changing the course of history. As the sun set over their new home, casting golden light across fields of green, the leader stood quietly at the edge of the settlement. Behind them, the sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air, a symphony of life reborn. Ahead lay the endless expanse of space, full of possibilities yet unexplored. For the first time in a long time, they felt at peace. The galaxy was still vast, still unpredictable, but somewhere within it, a small group of humans had proven that courage, ingenuity, and unity could overcome even the greatest challenges. Their arrival had changed everything, and though the road ahead would always hold uncertainties, one thing was certain: humanity's story was just beginning.